Hey everyone, and welcome back to Follow Me. I'm Susie Verdini.
And I'm Matthew Hallowell.
Today, we're going to talk about the meaning of following Jesus through a very interesting story.
So, we all know the story of the three wise men, right? Caspar, Melchior, and Balthazar, how they followed the star to Bethlehem. But there's another character, one you might not have heard of, Artaban, the other wise man. His story, quite different. And honestly, it's so deeply moving. It's about faith, sacrifice, the unexpected twists of our journey. Susie, do you remember the moment you first read it?
Yes, Matthew. I think I discovered it when I was a teenager through this old Christmas anthology my mom kept out every year. I remember sitting there, poring over it, and just being floored. It wasn't like the glossy nativity scenes I'd grown up with. You know, all warm and glowing and perfect. Artaban's journey, it felt messy and real and heartbreaking in a way. It just clicked. Like, this is what faith is really about. You don't always get the clean, happy ending you expect. It reshaped everything for me.
That's the beauty of it, isn't it? Artaban started with the same hope as the other magi, to follow the star, and he set out with these remarkable treasures, a sapphire, a ruby, and a pearl. But his course took such an unexpected turn. Those treasures became something else entirely.
Right. And that's what, well, broke me a little inside, in the best way. The sapphire, the ruby, the pearl. They're kind of his ultimate offerings, right? Pure, beautiful, fit for a king. But in his journey, he ends up surrendering them one by one. Not to Jesus directly, but to people in need along the way.
Exactly, it's powerful symbolism. Those treasures, they weren't just payments or trinkets, they were manifestations of his devotion. And each time he gave one up, he wasn't just losing a gift. He was emptying himself, sacrificing his own plans for the sake of someone else. That's a huge lesson. Giving what we hold on to most dearly, trusting it's the right thing. It's almost a reflection of the gospel call, isn't it?
Oh, it absolutely is. You know, it makes me think back to the nativity scenes I loved as a kid. My mom used to set up this big creche with tiny figurines of the three kings bringing their gifts. As a little girl, I thought those presents were impressive, but the real point was just the baby Jesus, right? But learning about Artaban, it just hit me differently. Love and devotion, there's so much more than what's in your hands. It's how you show up, how you offer yourself, even when it costs everything.
Absolutely, Susie. And that's why Artaban's journey resonates so deeply. His faith wasn't just a destination, it was a constant choice. Every time he sacrificed, every time he delayed his search to help someone, that's where his discipleship was lived out. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But isn't that so much like our own walks of faith?
Yes. And can we talk about that tension he faces? Every time he stops to help, he knows he's risking the chance to find the king he's searching for. Yet, he does it anyway. That kind of love, it's so raw and selfless. I think that's why the story sticks with me, why it keeps challenging me.
Exactly. Artaban's treasures remind us that following Jesus, it's not about holding on, it's about letting go, opening our hands. And his journey, messy as it was, became this profound illustration of God's grace working through imperfection, of love that truly transforms. Shall we dig into some of those moments where his sacrifices shaped his path?
That will be great.
Susie, one of those moments is when Artaban finds that dying man lying by the road. He knew that stopping to help might mean missing the other magi and losing the chance to give his treasures to the king. That tension was so real, wasn't it? And yet he chose to stay, to offer himself in that moment of need.
Exactly, Matthew. And it's that hesitation that gets me every time, because it feels so human. We all have those moments, don't we? When we're faced with a choice. Do I stick to my plan, my goals, or do I step out and help someone in need? It makes his decision feel so relatable.
That's the power of the story. His inner conflict mirrors our struggles. When he chooses compassion over ambition, we see this undeniable reflection of Christ's call to serve. But let's not romanticize it. It wasn't easy for him. He knew deep down he might lose the star's guidance, lose everything. And that, Susie, makes me think about those times when following Jesus feels like the harder road.
Yes, that hard road. It's where real faith happens. And the sacrifices Artaban makes are so vivid. Like, take the next moment back in Bethlehem. He's just missed seeing Jesus, the goal of his entire journey. But instead of wallowing in regret, he steps up again. When everything's chaos, the soldiers barging in, threatening to take children's lives, he gives up the ruby, his second treasure, to save a child. That gets me, Matthew. It really does.
It's heartbreaking and heroic all at once. That ruby was meant for the king, yet he used it to ransom a life. And in that moment, Artaban embodied what Jesus would later teach, that when we serve the least of these, we serve him. It challenges us, doesn't it? To ask, how often do we give up our own rubies? How often do we risk our comfort or resources to truly care for others?
That's what faith does. It stretches us. And through all this, Artaban's story teaches us that the treasures we let go of, be it time, resources, or even dreams, they can transform into gifts far beyond what we imagine. That's what makes his journey so rich and real. It's not about perfection, it's about persistence in love.
Completely agree. Artaban's sacrifices weren't in vain. They shaped his path, even when it seemed like he was moving farther from his destination. And isn't that just the gospel truth? That the sacrifices we make for others, even the costly ones, especially the costly ones, are the ones that truly matter. And that brings us to the final, heart-wrenching moment of Artaban's journey. When he gives his last treasure, the pearl, to save the young girl from slavery, it's such a profound act of sacrifice. What gets me is what follows. He feels like he's failed, that his lifelong search for the king has ended in disappointment. And yet, then comes that voice, the words we know so well. Inasmuch as you have done it unto one of the least of these, my brethren, you have done it unto me. Every single time I hear them, Susie, it sends shivers down my spine.
Oh, absolutely, Matthew. Wow. That moment is the heartbeat of the entire story for me. It's like everything clicks into place, doesn't it? Artaban thought he'd missed his chance to meet Jesus, to offer his treasures to the king, but all along, he'd been serving him. In the face of the dying man on the road, the child in Bethlehem, the girl facing slavery, Jesus was there. It's such a powerful reminder that our faith is lived out in how we love and serve others.
Exactly, Susie. And isn't that the gospel itself? When Jesus calls us to follow him, it's not just about belief, it's about action. Artaban's sacrifices, his detours, they weren't distractions from his journey. They were his journey, and through those moments of service and love, he found the very essence of what it means to be a disciple.
Yes. And it's so humbling, Matthew. Like, how often do we get caught up in waiting for these grand, obvious moments to share our faith or to serve, when it's really the small, everyday acts of kindness that reveal Jesus in the clearest way? Honestly, it makes me think, what are my jewels? What can I give up right here, right now for others?
That's such a good question, Susie, and the truth is those jewels look different for each of us. It might be our time, like taking a moment to check in on a neighbor, or serving at a local shelter, or someone's jewel might be their resources, donating to help someone in need. Even the everyday kindnesses, a smile, listening when someone's struggling, advocating for the vulnerable, those are treasures. They might seem small, but to someone else, they could mean the world.
Absolutely. And wow, it's just so encouraging, isn't it? Artaban's story kind of strips away the idea that we have to be perfect givers, or that our sacrifices have to look a certain way. It's not about how grand or polished our pearls are. It's about showing up with love, even if we feel like we're falling short. And honestly, Matthew, how often have we seen God use what we think is a tiny, imperfect offering and make it into something transformative?
Oh, all the time, Susie. And isn't that the beauty of grace? God doesn't just use the perfect, he uses the willing. Artaban thought he failed, that his journey ended in vain. But in God's eyes, his life was a success, not because he followed the star perfectly, but because he loved well. That, loving well, is the legacy of discipleship. And it's something each of us can carry today.
Yes. And for me, that's the takeaway from Artaban's story. It's not about reaching some flawless destination. It's about the journey, about the ways we reflect Jesus in the small, quiet acts of love along the way. It's everything the gospel calls us to be: servants, followers, and ultimately, givers of grace.
Couldn't agree more, Susie. Artaban's journey inspires us because it's our journey. We may not have sapphires, rubies, or pearls, but we all have something to offer. And through those offerings, through the love we show, Jesus meets us. That's the incredible truth. On that note, I think it's a beautiful place to wrap up. Thank you, Susie, for sharing your thoughts about this story. And to our listeners, we hope you found encouragement today to serve, to love, and to walk with Jesus in all the small ways that truly matter.
Thank you, Matthew. And thank you to everyone listening. Here's my favorite quote from this book. I hope it makes as much sense to you as it does to me. Who seeks for heaven alone to save his soul may keep the path, but will not reach the goal. While he who walks in love may wander far, yet God will bring him where the blessed are. Until next time, let's keep looking for those moments to offer what we have, to love boldly, and to see Jesus in the lives of those around us. Take care, everyone.